Hello and welcome to the Front Range Anthroposophical Cafe. I'm the host, Jamie York. It is the middle of July, or July 9th to be precise, and that's actually leading me into an announcement. So we have decided, and I told you a little bit about this 2 weeks ago, but I'm now dubbing it our first annual FRAC Midsummer's Weekend Extravaganza. We've got two different events going on next week, more than what we normally have with our Friday evening gathering, but we're actually having the Friday evening gathering and Saturday. And the reason for the Saturday is largely because we're gifted to have Sven Saar from England. He will be presenting, and of course, with the time difference, it's not possible for him to make it the normal time. So that will be Saturday. So mark that down on your calendar. 8 days from now, Saturday morning. Well, it depends if you're on East Coast or not, but it's 11 a.m. Mountain Time. That's 10 a.m. Pacific Time or 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We will have a FRAC meeting with our normal sort of routine that we normally have with Sven's presentation and so forth. The day before, however, and that's 1 week from today, at the normal time, but not a normal event, will be our first annual comedy evening. We've been talking about this for a long time, and Ronald Coach has agreed to basically lead this, and that will be really exciting. He's going to do one of his fantastic comedic presentations. And then, most importantly, we will go into breakout rooms and try to come up with our own skits. We will come up with our own skits, I should say. So that's going to be lots of fun. The meeting will not be recorded, kind of the nature of it. It's also going to involve about a 15-minute open mic time if you have a joke to share. Everything will be live. We're not going to be doing things recorded. We won't be sharing recordings or anything during that time. And again, that meeting will not be recorded. So I know some people are a little bit shy about trying to do these sort of things. It's a little bit of spontaneous work that we'll be doing, but it should be lots of fun. So please be brave and show up and go into the breakout rooms with small groups, and we're gonna put a little bit. We're not gonna prepare. I don't want to tell you what the skit will be about that you will prepare, because that'll be something that'll be just, I think, more valuable to do it kind of more spontaneously. So we're not giving any of that away. And again, Ronald Coach will be leading us through all of that next weekend. So please do come both for Friday, the comedy evening, and for Saturday, Sven's presentation. So there we are. Today, however, our special guest presenter was going to be Jordan Walker, but unfortunately he came down with an illness, and so he's not able to be with us today. I hope he gets better soon. I'm sure he will. But we had, at the last second, Andrew Linnell has been so kind on very short notice to step in and to present for us, I think, third time. Is that right, Andrew? I think it might be third time that he's presenting with us. But first, of course, Tom Altgeld will get us started with lighting the candle and saying the verse.
Good evening, dear friends. So the lighting of the candle. And I find myself in California, where I'm visiting my father, who is 94, and other friends such as Nancy Poole and Steve Berman. So I will start by reading the calendar of the soul verse, and I'm going to read the St. John's Tide verse again. That really colors this time. And I want to point out, for those of you who are not aware of it, that there's a wonderful St. John's imagination in the Four Seasons and the Archangels. And this was a theme for Nancy Poore, Steve Berman, and myself yesterday and the day before. And I just returned from Placerville, where Nancy lives. So the verse, thinking of the admonishing gaze of Uriel in the heights, complemented by Gabriel in the depths of Christmas. Now that my senses are at home on high, I hear my soul re-echo from her depths a fiery message from the gods. Welcome the hint. Seek thine own deep relation to spirit in the spirit's own foundation. So this evening, I was delighted to talk to Andrew. Was it yesterday or the day before? Anyway, on extremely short notice. And he spoke of a fabulous theme referred to as refined breathing. Andrew's research position in the nonprofit anthroposophical organization MISTEC prompted him to look more closely at Rudolf Steiner's indications regarding our technological age and the coming incarnation of Ahriman. An outcome of his research is a series of study guidebooks for study groups. Naturally, most of these pertain to technology, but one stands out as indication Steiner offered for reconnecting the human being with the spiritual world, a new yoga that Steiner referred to as a refined breathing. Andrew will offer the FRAC community an introduction to this most important development in human evolution. So he's happy to share his unfinished work with us tonight. Thank you, Andrew. I turn it over to you.
Thank you for that introduction. And what I would like to do is just say a few words about the fact that I'm here tonight is a bit of a fortunateness that this Hurricane Elsa came up the coast. I was supposed to be on vacation on Cape Cod this week and lasting through till tomorrow, but as it was coming up the coast, we decided to leave the vacation early. And just as I was packing up the car, Tom called and said, "Can you step in?" And so here I am. But this has been quite a wild day with all the rain that we've had and just trying to get ready at the same time for this. And so I hope you don't mind. This will be a first time going through this theme. And so my talk will be far from refined, shall we say. But let's try to do this. And I'm going to do a screen share. And now if I can get the cursor over there. Slideshow and from the beginning. So here we are at the cafe, and as Tom's introduction said, we're going to try to talk about something that is rather unknown to anthroposophists. And this is a new form of yoga. There's a particular lecture that Steiner gave in the mission of the Archangel Michael that addresses this. And I will try to give you some of that flavor of it tonight, as well as some of the further research that we've done as part of MISTEC. And I'll begin with this painting here by Helma Klint. And this is about breathing, obviously. Let me just change something here. Okay, so in Genesis, we can read, "And he," meaning Yahweh, "breathed into his nostrils, and Adam became a living soul." So Adam became not just a plant, but also then a sentient being who becomes aware of his own senses. Now, Steiner goes on to say, "I will confess that I would never have understood the part about the Elohim breathing the living being of man into his mouth and nose, if I had not known beforehand that the breath of earthly human beings also contains the first germinal beginnings of the beings who will become human on Jupiter. So that's a very important concept. The beings who will be on the human stage of Jupiter. But Jupiter human beings can only arise from the breath that owes its existence to the free deeds that are moral actions. So many of you probably know that when the moon departed during what is called the Lemurian period, and before that in the Hyperborean period, the sun withdrew and took with it many spiritual beings for their development. So I want to read something here. Goes like this: the kingdom of the human has split into two sexes. This gave rise to physical love among human beings, which again formed the bond between the two sexes. And on the other hand, the possibility of higher development of spiritual knowledge. So these two things, we've got the separation into sexes, but on the other hand, we get a development of spiritual, and we should also say general knowledge. Because the human kingdom split and the physical love arose, the gods could develop higher at the expense of men. So Steiner's often talked about how individuals, when they progress, they're actually kind of pushing down on the other beings around them, so that by doing so, when they have elevated themselves, they can turn around out of their love for them, and this is part of the washing of the feet, then lift them up. And so the gods could develop higher at the expense of men, since for the gods, the physical love of mankind was as much a vital air as oxygen of the plants is for humans and animals. For the plant, the light radiated back from the mineral kingdom. It is said in the Greek legend that the gods of nectar, that for the gods, this was nectar and ambrosia. This is the male and female love of each other. At the same time, the heart, lungs, and warm blood developed in humans. Previously, people were breathing through gills. They lived in an atmosphere you could not breathe through your lungs. Now the respiratory organs gradually change to be able to breathe in the oxygen of the air. So I wanted to bring this up to help us understand that we've been going through a lot of changes in human evolution. There was a time when humans directly experienced the spiritual world. No freedom could develop then in such an environment. Because of Lucifer in Eden, humanity had to descend deeply into the physical, where we could experience a reality in which nothing of the spiritual world exists other than the concept that we experienced a wisdom-filled world. And so we could presume this came from spiritual beings, but we've lost that connection. We have no proof of it. So after the Atlantean catastrophe, we entered the first of 7 post-Atlantean cultural ages, namely the Indian, and I'll call them Pakas. If you hear me say Paka for PACA, that means Post-Atlantean Cultural Age. Just a quick note, many translators continue to use the word epic, and it gets readers very confused if they're talking about a cultural age or one of the greater epics. So here the concept of oneness in the Indian Paka with the spiritual world was developed. We might call this an Abel, out of Cain and Abel, an Abel-inspired age. Very little interest in the physical world existed. Then in each of the 7 cultural ages, each lasts for 2,160 years, we progressed. And in that next Paka, called the Persian, there humans turned part of their attention to the earth. We might even say that Cain's voice was heeded during this Persian cultural age, whereas the Indian cultural age was concerned with this oneness. In the Persian, we begin to have an image of a duality. Next came the Egyptian Paka and the development of the idea of Trinity. Also, this was the time when Lucifer incarnated in China. It was a time when the spiritual world was noticeably withdrawing. No longer did one experience the spiritual world with their awake consciousness. Now dreams became the last connection as humanity entered the dark age known in Sanskrit as Kali Yuga. Then great initiates of India thereby developed yoga to aid humanity through this dark age. At this time, the air was ensouled. One could feel that with an in-breath, spiritual substance, even spiritual being of the macrocosm entered into one's own being, the microcosm. Many of you have taken yoga classes. Some of you may be yoga instructors. You will know the benefits from yoga that persist even into our time after Kali Yuga has ended. I'd like to try to make this clear, and I'm going to lean on this mission of the Archangel Michael. It comes from lecture 6 called The Ancient Yoga Culture and the New Yoga Will. And here he gives some diagrams. This diagram is for the Persian post-Atlantean cultural age. Remember, the first was the Indian, and if I were to draw that, it would be a circle with just one dot in it, showing the oneness of that. In the Persian, we would have an oval, or perhaps an ellipse is the better word, with 2 centers, meaning the heavenly and the earthly. In the Egyptian, we would draw a lemniscate showing the macrocosm and the microcosm, breathing one into the other. And so we have to actually conceive of this as being within the general context of what originated before. So I haven't drawn the circle around all of this. So now we come to the Greek-Roman period, where the physical body and the heavenly are in balance, at least at its start. And then this kind of separation takes place, where the physical begins to, through its own weight, sort of, you might say, outweigh the heavenly. And so we end up developing these Roman laws. And then materialism sets in, and Kali Yuga is at its darkest. Now, the potential to work with the etheric body as it loosens to form around this split, to make a new lemniscate for the ascent that we saw in the previous diagram. So you can see this in this diagram. If I can get my cursor to come over here, here is the previous state, and here we're forming the new lemniscate. A clairvoyant can see in one's exhalation the morality present within that person. What we exhale is the result of our inner work. What is exhaled is full of vapor, a watery element placed there by one's own etheric body. In the future, all will be able to see another's morality in their breath. So I just talked about the etheric body directing the exhalation. The astral body directs the inhalation. And we can see this when a person falls asleep, that the astral body, because it's outside now of what stays there in bed when a person falls asleep, we have to bring in the cosmic astrality and the cosmic ego to replace the astral and the ego that leave. This is in part our guardian angel. And so breathing will change while we're asleep. Now, what we're going to talk about here in this refined breathing is no longer breathing air, but breathing the four ethers. With the warmth ether, the light ether, the chemical or tone ether, and the life ether are all inhaled through our senses. And we'll hold the question, what is exhaled? So Steiner mentions all our senses, our physical senses, are breathing what he calls light. So what your ears hear, Steiner is still calling that light. That is the light ether. The ethers combine with the air that is within the body. So the warmth carries these other ethers. It carries the light ether, it carries the chemical ether, it carries the life ether. And through the senses, this light ether travels as far as our thinking, and it is brought to a stop there. The chemical ether goes into the rhythmic system, and then, shall we say, is breathed by our feeling. And likewise, the life ether travels as far as our metabolic system, and there is breathed into our willing. So I'm giving you just a high view. There's much more that can be gone into in all of these. So air, as we know, is what we exhale is carbon dioxide, and we have an exchange with the plant kingdom. Otherwise, we would not be able to survive in our atmosphere. So the question is, with the ether, where is this completed? If we are inhaling ether, what's going on? How does this work? Just as the air works with the plant kingdom, what we inhale and exhale, the plant kingdom inhales and exhales sort of the opposite to balance it. So we have to ask the question with the ethers. And Steiner does give an answer to this in the class lessons. And he talks about three hierarchies. And in the third hierarchy, the angels, archangels, and archai breathe in our thoughts, even our dead thoughts. And they are breathing these as a kind of light. And I'll point us to the prologue of St. John, where it says, in him is life. And this word in Greek is Zoe. It refers to the ethers. In him is life, and this life is the light of men, or mankind. So the angels breathe in this thoughts of ours and breathe it in as a light. The dead thoughts are taken from the illusion of the senses and become living thoughts through the breath of the angeloi, archangeloi, and archi. And then, oh, I'm sorry, that's the third hierarchy. They then live in our thoughts and give them life, and even being. And then the second hierarchy raise this back. So here we have this completion in the second hierarchy where what we have breathed in and of the light ether and made into our thinking, this is then breathed in by the third hierarchy, and then with the second hierarchy, in as it's made into beings, these are rayed out through the sun and the stars into our existence. So we see how the exousiae, dynamis, and Kyriates give over what they received from the beings of the third hierarchy to what we call rays in the earthly life, rays of the sun and of the stars. The awakened, now living world thoughts are given over to all that rays. In reality, rays are not physical. In reality, it is the spirit that beams in the rays. And lastly, the first hierarchy monitors all of this in order to adjust evolution. Now, to reiterate what Steiner said, I will confess that I would never have understood the part about the Elohim breathing the living being of man into his mouth and nose if I had not known beforehand that the breath of earthly human beings also contains the first germinal beginnings of the beings who will become human on Jupiter. So now I'd like you to consider what it means that reality itself, in which we all live, has been transformed so that the air we breathe is something different from what it was 4 or 5 millennia ago. Not only the consciousness of mankind has changed, but so has the air itself. There was soul in the atmosphere of the earth. The air was the soul. But this is no longer the case today. The spiritual beings of elemental nature, of whom Steiner speaks about, they penetrate into you. They can be breathed if one practices yoga breathing today. But that which was attainable in normal breathing 3 or 4 or 5 millennia BC, 3 millennia BC or up to 5,000 years ago, cannot be brought back artificially. Steiner says to think that it may be brought back is the great illusion of the Orientals. What I am stating here describes a reality. The ensouling of the air, which belongs to the human being, no longer exists. And therefore, the beings of whom I spoke, and I'm quoting Steiner right now, yesterday, I should like to call them the anti-Michaelic beings, are able to penetrate into the air and through the air into the human being. And in this way, they enter into mankind, as I have described it yesterday, and we are only able to drive them away if we put in place of yoga that which is the right thing for today. That is this refined breathing, this new yoga. And we must strive for this. We can only strive for that which is the right thing for today if we become conscious of a much more subtle relation of man to the external world, so that in regard to our ether body, something takes place which must enter our consciousness more and more. And that is something similar to the breathing process. So the essential point is that through a special kind of moral and spiritual culture, the ordinary interweaving of the physical body, the ether body, the astral body, and the ego must be changed. Those directions which are given for the training of moral feelings, as also those for concentration in thinking, for meditation, all this makes finally for the one goal of loosening the spiritual texture which binds together the physical and etheric bodies, so that the etheric body does not remain so firmly fitted into the physical body as it naturally is. All the exercises strive after this lifting out, this loosening of the etheric body. Thereby, another union between the astral body and the etheric is brought about. That's from the lecture cycle, Jesus to Christ, lecture 2. So from GA 212, I'd like to bring up one little point here. You can see in this diagram that the ego has to do with the physical and the astral with the etheric. These two are the father and the mother principles. A moral impulse, which we've been talking about, will show up in the breath, begins in the ego, but it must go all the way through to the dead thinking of the physical. It must then raise up this dead thinking into living thinking. And so Steiner says man's task is to bring about harmony within himself between the paternal and the maternal elements that are both within every human being. What is the relationship? Now, I'm going to go into a little bit of alchemy of this refined breathing. What is the relationship of silica to light? We know that silica is important for computer chips. Is it important for our senses? So there are what's trying to call configurative forces in limestone and in silicon. Limestone or calcium gives the body the earthly, whereas silicon offers the cosmic formative power to the body. Carbon seeks support in the formative activities of both limestone and silicon. So carbon is this amazing element that permeates everything. And so within mankind, carbon is the philosopher's stone. And we see this when we are thinking. Willed thinking creates carbon dioxide. The silicon nature is the universal sense within the earthly realm. Like our senses, it claims nothing, whereas limestone wants to claim everything. The sense organs do not perceive themselves. They only perceive that which is outside them. So the senses, Steiner, I'm quoting him here now, says the senses are nothing other than differentiated breathing organs. Eye, ear, all of these are refined breathing organs. Breathing expands to all the senses. Just as it lives in the lung, it lives in the eye, except that in the lungs, it combines with carbon, and in the ears with highly refined silica. Carbon dioxide is formed in the organism. In the senses, a very fine silicic acid is formed. Man lives downward by converting oxygen to carbon dioxide. He lives upward into the zone of his sense nerve system by combining oxygen with silica, forming very fine silicic acid. So we live in a way that when breath turns to blood, it generates carbon dioxide. When breath passes around the senses, it generates silicic acid. Oops. So with the coming of this, so I guess I need to say one little thing before Steiner, in the talk I gave last time, we talked about how Steiner had said coming, even in his time, there will be a tremendous drop-off in fertility. We're already witnessing this. And by the time we get to the year 5700, we will no longer be able to incarnate through sexual procreation. Something new will have to come about. And during this whole period of time between now and the year 5700, this loosening of the etheric body within the physical will be causing the physical body to wither, eventually coming to a discharge, if you will say, a jettisoning of our physical body. And so as we develop that, we will have to develop the ability to use our etheric body for driving our existence. This development is found in anthroposophical meditation. So I'd like to quote something from Steiner here. Let us consider first what the situation is when the astral body and ego approach the etheric body. In clairvoyance, one can bring this condition about fairly easily by strengthening thinking, strengthening it by very thorough energetic meditation. Then it is easy to come to this condition, and that is a beginning of initiation. One slips down into the etheric body, but is not yet able to take hold of the physical body. There one remains in the etheric body. In this condition, it is possible to think, yes, to think very, very well. One sees nothing, hears nothing, but one can think very well. Thinking is not in the least extinguished, but seeing, hearing, and other sense activities are suppressed. At first, thinking remains the same, except that one can think more than previously. One can think such thoughts as we are expressing here, for instance, thoughts about the macrocosm. So thinking becomes wider. One knows clearly, now I am in the etheric world. Thus, when one is in the etheric body, one is truly in the world ether. So a lot of us get confused by this. We're in the consciousness soul age, and many of us expect this means becoming one with nature again. But in fact, Steiner said the question affronts us with modern technology. And is this modern technology simply a source of death? And he goes, yes, and it must inevitably be. And so why does it arise? Certainly not in order to provide mankind with some spectacle of machines and industry, but for a totally different reason. It arose precisely because of the seeds of death it bore within it. For if man is surrounded by a moribund mechanical civilization, it is only by reacting against it that he can develop the consciousness soul. So long as man lived in communion with nature, that is before the advent of the machine age, he was open to the suggestion of oneness because he was not then fully conscious. He was unable to be fully self-sufficient because he had not yet experienced the forces of death. ego consciousness and the forces of death are closely related. So I'd like to give you a timeline picture of things that are coming. You can see here from 3573 to 5733 will be in the Slavic or the sixth post-Atlantean cultural age. And before this comes to a completion, we will have reached the end of the appearance of Christ in the etheric. And soon after that, we will have reached the end of sexual procreation. But during this period of time, especially the Slavic people will have been developing something Steiner called a eugenic occultism, which means to be using stars and star wisdom for developing the right forces for a person coming into life. From 5700 going forward, some kind of new form of procreation that we will be developing with the help of the fallen spirits of darkness will occur. But this will lead to, and through this American seventh Paka, to finally the war of all against all and the outspreading across the surface of the earth of something he calls spidery beings. And then after this war, the moon returns and we go into the sixth epoch where we no longer have physical bodies. So I just want to mention that along with this, in my previous talk, I mentioned the Ahrimanic double that we have had with us since we began physical incarnations. This double wanted to conquer the earth, but to do so, they needed bodies. This body that we share with the double that joins us just before birth will be given over entirely to this Ahrimanic double in the future, but they will not be able to hold the human form. That form was given to us by the Exousiai or the Elohim. And so once they take over the physical body, the second fall will occur. And these beings will fall into a different form, a spidery form. So if we were to imagine the last earthly incarnation before the spiritualization of the earth, because the earth itself will be going through its death and rebirth, its own Easter as we go into the sixth epoch. So the laying aside of the last physical body, those who are now living on the earth will have progressed thus far through the Christ principle that in a certain way, it will not be very difficult for us to lay aside our very last physical body. Think of the last death possible in our earth evolution. Think of the laying aside of the last physical body. This is the last death of incarnations, which in the apocalypse is called the first death. Those who have received the Christ principle see this physical body as a sort of husk which falls away. The etheric body has now become important to them, for with the help of the Christ, it has become so organized that it is, for the time being, adapted to the astral body and no longer desires and longs for what is below in the physical world. And so that is that separation of the goats and the sheep and the second death that some. So this is what, okay, so we've talked about how humanity has had to descend, and in order to ascend, we need to loosen the etheric body. And so we will eventually discard this physical body, but to develop this loosening, we need to develop this new kind of breathing of the ethers, this refined breathing, this new yoga. And so I'm going to give you these two questions to take into our breakouts. What are the ramifications of Christ being in the etheric regarding refined breathing? And why has refined breathing been so unknown within anthroposophy. I'm also showing the book, if you want to get much more. This is a 500-page book of lectures by Steiner, and you can get it at the Rudolf Steiner bookstore or on Amazon. So back to you, Jamie. Thank you.
All right, Andrew, thank you so much. Could you repeat those two questions again so everybody could hear it?
Sure. The first one is, what are the ramifications of Christ in the etheric regarding refined breathing? So the question there is, Christ is in the etheric, and along with this, Steiner taught us some, indicated, I guess is the better word, what this new yoga is as a refined breathing. So are these two related in some way, and how so? And then why is refined breathing so unknown within anthroposophy?
Okay, so those are the two questions, and we'll go ahead now into our breakout rooms. Hello and welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a nice conversation in your breakout rooms. Andrew certainly gave us some challenging questions to think about and to talk about. And this is the part of the meeting, of course, where you can share any of your thoughts with the larger group. And as a reminder, yes, you can click on the participants button to raise your hand if you would like to contribute. You can wave at me on the screen, although I may not be able to see it. Or you can also click on, I think it's the reactions button. Anyway, raise your hand and I'll then call on you. So Mary Louise, go ahead.
So Andrew, I'd love to hear your answer to your second question. I can't hear you, but you're shaking your head. You're going to withhold?
All right, I'm gonna, I was thinking, no, let's hear from some more before I try to, but that second question, in case people have forgotten, is why is refined breathing so unknown within anthroposophy? I will mention that it appears at least 4 times in the first class lesson, and still people don't know about it. And I've wondered, is it in some sense because moral development needs to happen for it to become better known? Or is it because we need more, those 48 anthroposophists who are really working for it to become better known? I don't know, actually, to be honest, why it's unknown. I was so surprised when I stumbled on it, and that it just kept showing up, and it shows up throughout many, many lectures. But he doesn't, other than this one that I was pointing out from the mission of Archangel Michael, that's the only one where he really emphasizes we need to develop this as a new yoga. And he even uses that word, but he uses the word will. I didn't bring up in the talk the fact that until the time of Christ, we were dealing with Lucifer, the past, and thinking. Now we are dealing with Ahriman, the future, and the will. This is the development of the will as we go forward.
Okay, I'm going to call on Christina West.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, Andrew. Nice to see you.
Hi,
So
Christina.
Hi. So, did you actually explain to us the breathing technique, or do you know it? Or
Nobody knows it.
okay, so
It has to be developed.
okay, so tell me if I'm mistaken, but didn't Steiner say that this would happen naturally for an occult student gradually over time? This making it, the diamond body.
It's possible, but that particular passage I haven't seen in this research.
I can't do, wherever I found that. But that's what we were discussing in our breakout groups.
Oh, good. Well, if anybody comes across that, let's share it. There's be good to know.
Christine?
So I was in a breakout group with Christina, and you know, I have a background in the anthroposophical speech arts, and many of my teachers have said that that particular way, the way that we are taught to breathe is that new form of yoga, the way that the actual art of speech. And so I again don't have a specific reference, but I would be happy to start searching for that specific reference, because it wasn't a flippant remark that anyone made when we were working with the speech arts. So,
It's funny you mentioned that, because I have thought that if anywhere in the anthroposophical circles and initiatives, that it would be the speech work that would know the most about this. And so I'm going to suggest to Tom Algelt that he give you about a year and come back and have a session one night on what's known in the speech work on this refined breathing. That would be wonderful.
absolutely. And I'd love to talk with you more about it anytime, Andrew.
Me too. I'm all for it, Christine.
I'm wondering if Mary Louise, you would like to comment on what you just typed into the chat so that people could hear that. I'm trying to find where you are, if you wish.
Thank you, but no thanks.
Okay. So Mary Louise typed in, I'm trying to read the name. It's Yeshahayu Ben Aran has written a book called Cognitive Yoga that speaks of this practice.
Yes.
Okay, Marianne, you're next.
I have heard about the new way of yoga a long time ago in different places, that it's called that we no longer breathe air, yoga as air. We're supposed to breathe in light. What I'm interested in, Andrew, is the very term refined breathing. Just because you have certain words that describe it, like I would like to know, for instance, what that means in German. So I would, what did Steiner actually say? Then because, just because you use a term refined breathing doesn't mean that it is, not under that term, but it would be known to many people that are doing meditation, and especially with eurythmy, that we're doing that, except we don't use that term. So have you got another term for it? Or did you come across, or what?
Not yet, but I will say that in this breathing in the lungs, Steiner calls this, our normal breathing, and then below and our digestion and all is a bit coarser. He uses that in the translation. So in the English translation, it's called a coarser breathing, and then a refined breathing with the ethers through the senses. You can see where he's going with that, but I haven't seen a translator use a different word than refined. Do you have a suggestion, Marianne? Are you still there? No.
Okay, I think she's not there. You could raise your hand if you wanted to speak again. Otherwise, I'm calling on Cynthia.
Hi there, Andrew. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Synchronistically, I was just reading in the pastoral medicine course last night, exactly the one that you quoted from. So wouldn't you know it?
Yeah.
Where Rudolf Steiner was talking about this breathing in of the light, and how actually breathing in the warmth is what he speaks of, but that the warmth is carrying the light.
Yes.
So in this lecture, the warmth, so through the lungs, we carry in the air, and that comes into the rhythmic system, but through the senses, all of the senses, we breathe in the light, and also the tone ether, and also the life ether. This is, you and I have both read that then recently, and I tried to understand that. But I really appreciated Marianne's question here about what is this light really, because I remember reading somewhere else in Rudolf Steiner how he was speaking of how that light which has made everything lies at the heart of everything that we perceive in the sense world, and that whatever we take into the senses is taking in that original creative light, that the essence of things through a different doorway than what we take in through our air from our breathing. And so I think, to answer Marianne's question, and my next search is to understand what he was saying. I read this long ago when he spoke about this light that has disappeared into everything that we take in through our senses. Now, okay, so to take that again, so we take that all in through our senses. The warmth carries the light. And then he says that that light is, so to speak, deposited, or he says it hits a wall, or it's stopped, or it's caught in the nerve sense system. And then the warmth continues more deeply into us, and it is held then in the rhythmic system, in the chemical ether, in the tone ether.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues deeper into the metabolism. And this is what you were saying, this is what's in your diagram, continues deeper into the metabolism as the life ether. And this then goes back to this whole other profound question that as biodynamic farmers, we're always dealing with: what is cosmic nutrition? Where Rudolf Steiner says, just this incredibly difficult and profound statement, that we don't gain weight through what we eat with our mouth. We gain weight through what we take in through our senses. And we gain the power of our thinking through what we take in through our mouth. So he calls us the polar streams of earthly nutrition and cosmic nutrition. And everyone who works with biodynamics is profoundly interested in understanding this, and everyone who works in the medical field as well. What does it mean to get these germs of life through what we take into the senses, and how to get to the germs of thinking through what we take in through what we eat? And that's all involved in this cosmic nutrition stream, and also in the breathing with the senses, this internalization of air. So I think we're just at the beginning of this journey, just at the very beginning. So you ask why we don't know about it. It's hidden there in his work. in the last decade of his last 5 years of his life, from the biodynamic work through the pastoral medicine work to the class lessons, it shows up at the end of his life. But he wasn't talking about it too much except there in those Michael letters later on. You want a dialogue on that, or is that enough?
That's great, but I'll just, for everyone's sake, what was mentioned by Cynthia is Pastoral Medicine Lectures 7 and 8, and mostly 7. So if you want to get those, they're on RS Archive as well, but yeah.
And it's in a print book called Broken Vessels.
Yes, Broken Vessels, right.
Okay, I'm
Not
gonna
an easy
move on to
book.
Bill. So Bill, you can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
So I would, I'm just imagining a process built on the lesson 4 of the first class, which I am going to be working on all summer long until September, until the Sonoma group, changes it to lesson 5. But imagining the lemniscate that was described, imagining the eye of the heart in the center of the lemniscate, and imagining breathing by traveling the lemniscate up into the 2-petal lotus, back down through the heart, the eye of the heart, down to the metabolic spirituality, back to the heart, and back up to the 2-petal lotus, and back and forth, and back and forth, as a process of breathing. Question. It's a question.
Okay, we're getting to the end of time here, and Marianne has her hand up, perhaps in response to what was asked of her earlier. And then I'm going to give Andrew a chance to just give a very brief sort of closing thoughts before we end the formal part of the meeting. And of course, other questions and comments can be saved after we blow out the candle and have our informal conversations. Go ahead, Marianne.
By the way, I couldn't unmute myself. It wouldn't do it. Some other picture came in. Anyways, what Cynthia said, of course, points to the fact that, it all goes back to the I am. And the I am lives in the warmth of the blood. And the blood, of course, goes everywhere in the body. And understanding what the heart is really doing, and understanding what the 4th phase of water is. People only are familiar with 3 phases of water. So there's a 4th phase of water. So unless you take all that into consideration, you can't really do this refined breathing. I mean, if you think the heart is a pump, so that's all little stepping stones on the way to get to the point where you can have refined breathing and have it all the time. So anyways, I think one thing that helped me is flying through the air after the motorcycle accident, and having a kind of a reboot that way. And now that I'm the age of 80, it's absolutely the best time to really, really understand what it means to say I am.
Thank you, Marianne. And Andrew, a couple of quick closing thoughts, and then we'll turn it over to Tom.
Sure. I tried to present something tonight, which unpolished as it was trying to open a door, or shall I say, I threw a match through the open door to try to get some fire going and people to look at this. And like many of you, we're all sitting here going, did I just waste an hour and a half because there's no cookbook here on how I can bake this bread? you know, and yeah, there isn't. We're all the, we're trying to invent this recipe. And so I hope a lot of you have got that fire now to go out and try to come up with a recipe, so to speak. So, Tom, to you.
Well, let me start by reading the calendar of the soul verse again. Now that my senses are at home on high, I hear my soul re-echo from her depths, a fiery message from the gods. Welcome the hint. Seek thine own deep relation to spirit in the spirit's own foundation. And it's so interesting that we are in the heights and we're talking about the depths. We're talking about a lemniscate. We're talking about a whole breathing process. All things were made through the word. Nothing was made other than through the word, and in him was life, the beginning of a breathing process, and life was the light of man, of humanity. If that isn't breathing, living on a much more refined level each stage, if we take and mix this with the book by Bastian Bahn, Christ as Lord of the elements, what does it mean to be the Lord of elements? The Lord of everything, the Lord of the physical body in its perfection, as reflected in the Uriel St. John's Tide mystery of Uriel gazing into the depths of the earth and weaving out of that silver blue a garment of gold that he hands on to Michael. If all of this, the four seasons and the archangels talk about a living, breathing interaction, if we bring Christ alive as the I am that I am in us individually, then we would be breathing in this refined way. I find it remarkable. I said, all of us in the group said, this went over our heads. It's way beyond us to understand. And how do we bring it in a language that lives more imaginatively, pictorially, that breathes life into these concepts, that bring it alive for us? And you really rattled the cage for many of us, certainly in our group. Thank you, Andrew. So this is what I get to do at the end of summarizing things. And I invite people to bring their questions, their frustrations, because that's from that we will create a recipe between us in conversation. If conversation isn't related to breathing out and breathing in and morally warmed with our hearts, I think this is what it's all about. So I invite people to join us in our unrecorded conversation now. Thank you, Andrew. Splendid.
Don't forget to snuff the candle.
Oh, I don't have a snuffer, so I'm going to blow it out. Thank you, Jamie.